it's not good enough just to look at economic growth. That has been kind of the biblical stature that corporate America has been looking at. We have growth, we have growth. But as I mentioned to you earlier, in the last 45 years, despite unbelievable growth, in real inflation accounted for dollars, the average worker is no better off than he or she was 45 years ago. In the last 30 years, the top 1% have seen a $21 trillion increase in their wealth. Bottom half of America has seen a decline in their wealth. Half of the people today are living paycheck to paycheck.
No, growth is the wrong measurement.
Of course it's the wrong one. What the question is our economy working for the people here? Is it working for ordinary Americans? That's the criteria. Do people feel secure? Do they know that their kids, everything being equal, are going to have a better standard of living than they do?
This argument put forth by Bernie Sanders works because on a gut level, the argument is right. The last Democratic president in office gave 95% of the income gains to the top 1%. And that guy who did that went from pillar to post all across the United States in every microphone as he could find, yelling as loud as he possibly can of hope and change! Hope and change! Hope and change! Almost like a religious doctrine of sorts. And then gave 95% of the income gains to the top 1%. That was not an act of God. Those were policies put in place by politicians who told you things and then did something else. Do you believe that this guy is a true believer? Does he know what I just said? He knows it intimately. Yes, he knows exactly what I just said. And what I just said is true. Do you think that's the same for him? Everybody for the last 20, 30 years has called Bernie Sanders radical. And even in this, he defines himself as a democratic socialist. He is a true believer. Under no circumstances would he have gotten in and gave 95% of the income gains to the top 1%. And when Occupy Wall Street came up, what do you think he would have done as opposed to an Obama that knocked down those encampments? The point I'm making to you is his argument resonates because his argument is fundamentally right. The public feels detached from the government that is supposed to represent that public. I mean, after all, how do you give 95% to the top 1%? Think about what I'm saying for the moment. The Republican Party is the party that is supposed to represent the rich. Fair enough. But what about the Democrats? Not so much. But that is what they've been doing. Is it fair? Basic point. Is it fair? And I understand fair is defined from the standpoint of the individuals involved in the process, and there is no God looking down, giving an accountment of fair or not. But as human beings, we make a determination ourselves on what we believe is right and wrong. And you think about all the things that we, as human beings, do to make the society what it is. And it's fundamentally, could be, all of it. The cooks, the cleaners, the people who keep the lights on, the people who serve you your sandwich or give you your tea, the one who makes the streets, the electricians, the plumbers, the doctors, the lawyers. I guess I'm making a point to you that all of these people throughout the society itself, many of these people, poor or middle class, under pressure, makes the society tick. And of all of those people, millions, a small 1% of it expropriates 95% of the wealth. Is that fair? If your society is doing that, should you not do something about the system that allocates it in those terms? Now, there'll be some people who are not far to the left as I am, but fair enough. But even among those people, Donald Trump gets in office making a similar pitch, even though that pitch is tilted in a terrifying direction. But I'm making this point that with Trump, they wanted to blow up the system of sorts. With Sanders, it's almost a correction of the system. But if a system allocates that much wealth to the top 1%, should you not change the system that does it? And if the guy who's screaming hope and change didn't do it, what about the guy who just calls himself a democratic socialist? What about that guy? The true believer. That message, regardless of political tenor, resonates. Because again, that message to the right or left resonates as true. You can look out your window and see it. Losing your job, having a factory sent overseas because the guy can maximize his profit at your expense. You can see it. You can feel it, especially in those particular Rust Belt areas. Scott Walker, union busting Scott Walker, governor of Wisconsin, he is terrified of one of the candidates in the Democratic Party. And that person's name is Bernie Sanders. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, subscribe. Yes, this is Groundhog's Day. I've done this video once before. That video was horrid. And so I destroyed that video so no one else can see it other than those 200 people who just so happen to see it. Scott Walker's terrified of Bernie Sanders. Now, I'm going to give you his reasoning, but before we even get to his reasoning, there's a reason, just empirically. Sanders beat Hillary in Wisconsin, 56 to 43%. And right now, polling between Trump and Sanders has him beating Trump in Wisconsin by 2 points. Now, that's just, data of sorts. I remember Hillary lost Wisconsin. And I remember that morning, there was a little computer device. I've said this before. There was a little computer device where you could point out the states. And if you just did a blind point out, like you weren't looking at the score, she lost. And I heard that morning that Hillary Clinton was sending people to Wisconsin, a state she did not go to, by the way, to try to pull those people back. You want to know who did go to Wisconsin for Hillary Clinton? To the chagrin of his supporters?
How do you factor
This guy.
in
This guy went to Wisconsin for Hillary Clinton. And then they say he was disloyal. But she said blacks were insufficiently loyal also. Scott Walker is scared of Sanders. Scott Walker should be scared of Sanders. Listen to this. This is Walker. Like Trump, people believe Bernie is fighting for them. His ideas is most extreme, but he's authentic. He doesn't hide the substance, Walker told the Post. I'm most concerned about Bernie winning the Democratic nomination. Wisconsin voters respond to authentic candidates. I worry about Sanders because I think a lot of voters, particularly in the bubble, forget it's more about the gut check than a policy list. And compare Sanders to Trump. Successful use of the anti-establishment rhetoric and visceral campaigning, it's a gut check thing. It is, right? I can communicate something to you. I can tell you something. But people forget that most communication is nonverbal. What is the guy saying and how is he projecting it? It's not just a series of ideas written across a page. You're a human being. How you interact with people has an emotional component to how you interact with people. And if that guy is giving off something that you yourself is feeling on a gut way, I don't care what your political ideology is. If it resonates, it resonates. Think for the moment between the two. And this is why I think Sanders is a better candidate to go against Trump. I think it nullifies Trump. I honestly does. I honestly do. These two on the debate stage, Trump has had 4 years of fuck-ups. And yeah, you could say the impeachments and everything else, fair enough, political wrangling. But nothing accomplished, failures across the board. And what is Sanders going to say? You said you were going to do this for the middle class. Have you seen his new video for New Hampshire? It makes the basic argument. Trump said he was going to help you, and instead he helped his billionaire cronies. That argument, just like that gut level argument of people feeling they were fucked over, rings true. You're not going to get the hardcore Trump supporters, but you don't have to get the hardcore Trump supporters. They're not on your list. There's always a gradient, right? And within the context of that gradient, your probability of getting people will increase, even if it's just incrementally, depending upon the demographic you're dealing with. From the standpoint of a hardcore Trump supporter, yes, you might get 2%. Not great. But when you get into the rest of America, which is like 90-something percent, then you have like larger gains that you can make within those demographics. And not everybody is hardcore political. Sometimes when our bubbles, when we interact on Twitter and everything else, we get a bad impression on what I think most people are. I don't think most people are overtly political. I don't think that most people are woke. And so you may have some people who are hardcore on the right, some people are hardcore on the left. But ultimately, the game is being played in the center. And I don't mean center political distribution. I just mean center America itself. This resonates. Scott Walker knows what I know. That making this argument of you are being fucked over, you're being screwed over, both of these political parties are in cahoots with one another. This guy tries to be least worse and uses that as a political argument, making you think that the entire political distribution is just between these two narrow points. It is not. It is not. It is not. 1,000 times it's not. Part of the reason they hate Sanders so much is because if he's a Democrat, what the fuck are they? Fuck are they? Moderate Republicans posing as Democrats. You're being had. You're being had. The wealth that you're creating in this nation is being sucked out of this nation. You want to tax the rich. That's off the table. You want less war. That's off the table. You want, on average, health care paid for by government, even if you don't necessarily entirely agree with Medicare for all. You will, however, let him get Medicare for all if he gives you this other stuff from the standpoint of work and making sure you can have these other benefits. Scott Walker should be terrified of Sanders. He knows what I know. He knows what I know. I'm going to end this here. Like, share, subscribe. Scott Walker is a governor. Oh, fair enough. Political operative Scott Walker. I say it that way. Thank you for correcting me. Thank you for correcting me. Scott Walker is not governor anymore. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I love reading that. It's like billionaire tears. I said it before. 1,000 billionaire tears can get rid of poverty. Bill Gates crying about being having $80 billion in the bank. Have you seen that? Bill Gates says, when I started thinking about losing $100 billion, this man has like $150 billion or something. Like some insane amount of money. Even if you were left with $1 billion, Bill, I think you would be okay. I think you would be okay. Like, share, subscribe.